Hey guys, we're coming to you from downtown Albuquerque. We're outside of the New Mexico Bank and Trust building. I have Pastor Jesse Lusko from Calvary Church on the west side. They've been there for about a year now, so if you haven't checked them out, I encourage you. They have a beautiful building. They have an amazing coffee shop in there called Sopo. Go spend some time out there. But we're just here today together to talk about all the crazy stuff that's going on in our city, our state, our country. And really we're going to focus today's talk maybe on a little bit on racism and the thought and what's taking on in our place. So Pastor Jesse, tell us a little bit about what you think is going on this time and where we are in our community.
Yeah, well, I think that this year has brought a tremendous amount of turmoil, and obviously there's a lot of division, a lot of different opinions, and people approach things in a different way. But I think no matter what, it's been an extraordinarily difficult year. Even with the pandemic, I mean, there's people concerned about the massive loss of life and the fact that now it's spreading through Brazil and it's spreading through third world, people dying. And then on the other side of it, there's people who are concerned about 30 million people losing their jobs, and then now again, another issue that's become incredibly painful and divisive is just the reality that we do live in a country. It is a fact of history that we live in a country where millions and millions of Africans were enslaved and marginalized and lynched and segregated. And I think anyone who has a soul, anyone who has the Spirit of God in them, should be able to condemn the actions of those 4 officers in Minneapolis, hands down, because that is the image of God that was stamped out of the breath of God that was stamped out of that man, George Floyd. But obviously, since then, there's been protests and violence and revenge, and there's a lot of pain and a lot of turmoil. And I believe that Christians should be slow to speak, quick to listen, and slow to become angry. And I wanted to ask you, in your life, have you ever experienced racism? Have you ever experienced hatred because of your ethnicity, your background?
Yeah, I think in 2 stories, right? Number one, I'll tell you directly related out of my family. I'm obviously not full African American, or full black, whatever term you choose to go with. And that's a whole different discussion, really, right? What do you want to call somebody? But my mother's white, my dad is black.
Yeah.
And in fact, my family, my white side of my family, never knew that I was going to be a mixed baby until I was born. My white grandfather is from West Texas, and my white great-grandfather is from Kentucky. Yeah. So we have these 2 sides that we're talking about 1 generation, 2 generations essentially removed that freely used every racial slur. And in fact, when I was growing up, I heard them quite a bit. I heard the N-word, I heard what they called Jewish people, I heard what they called Spanish people, and I was kind of ignorant to it. I didn't know any different. Now, I didn't use those terms, but I heard it directly in my own house, at the dinner table, right?
Gosh,
so I heard it, I felt it, but I was never loved any different.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting factor of hatred for somebody just because of their skin color or who they are, but because I was family, I was still loved as part of that situation.
Yeah.
The other scenario is when I was going to be I was an athlete here at UNM, and when I was being recruited by several different colleges, I went to a college in the South. I was in Louisiana, and I was being recruited by this school, and my uncle was at the University of Arkansas. And he had told my mother that your son, I would advise him to make a very strong decision if he wants to come here, because he's going to have to make a decision of who he is. Yeah. And I asked the question, well, who am I? Yeah. Well, you got to make a decision there. Are you white or are you black? Because both sides have strong opinions and strong feelings. And we don't see that in New Mexico because we're blessed here. I mean, we have a melting pot, we have great food, we just don't see it as much. There might be a little racism towards Native Americans or Spanish people or blacks, but it's nothing like people face in Texas or moving even more south into Arkansas, Alabama, Louisiana, all those states. Yeah. So absolutely, I think we all have our piece of that, but I've never felt unsafe like someone with George Floyd or those situations in my own scenario. But Jess, I want you to talk about a little bit about people that are maybe struggling or suffering in this time. What can they do? What would you, as their pastor or just as a leader or a friend, tell somebody that's dealing dealing with this hatred or this loss or this fear of control with COVID, what was some advice you give to them?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you asked that question. Something that I think is so tremendous about the Christian faith is that God isn't this aloof, detached, transcendent being, but all throughout the Old Testament, God says that He's the defender of orphans, He's the defender of widows, He takes up the cause of the oppressed, that His throne is built on justice and righteousness. And you see that, in the book of Proverbs, it says that he who mocks the poor shows contempt for his maker, and he who is generous to the poor lends to the Lord. So you see, God cares about suffering people. Maybe you've lost a job. Maybe you've experienced racial hatred. Maybe you've been, wrongfully, marginalized or convicted or anything. Well, here's the thing. You read of that all throughout the Old Testament. Then God comes and He steps into the shoes of the oppressed. Jesus was a brown man. Jesus was born into poverty. He was born a minority. He was born under tyranny. He was. We talk about the manger, away in a manger. Dude, that'd be like being born in a truck stop bathroom. That's where God entered the world. He wasn't born in the Ritz-Carlton, man. He stood up to the oppressors and religious people who were using their religion as a way to get rich. He stood up to those people knowing what it was going to cost him. And so I would just say that if you're suffering, Jesus, He entered into your suffering. But at the same time, He said, love your enemies. And He said, repay no one evil for evil. Going and shooting a cop or breaking a window or setting something on fire. I understand that's coming from a place of rage and pain, but Jesus said to love our enemies and to bless those who curse us. But He knows your pain, and He entered into our pain at the cross.
So good. I think the other thing that would go on to that is Jesus was so good. It says in John, right? They're weeping, right? It's such a strong word. It's just crying. Jesus wept.
Yes.
So He understood clearly what empathy truly is. I heard you talk the other day on Jim Williams' show, and you talked about three things that just had such an impact on me. In fact, I've told everybody I see about these things, and I think they're so basic, but it's so good. You talked about the 3 Ds and the 3 E's, and I think this is that carrot, guys, that you want to take home with you, because it's something that we can really apply, and it kind of applies to this racism issue. It applies to this COVID fear issue. It applies to life in general of what goes on. So tell us a little about those and help the viewers understand what's going on.
Yeah, I think, oftentimes because of our culture, our background, I heard a pastor say that what you see is based on where you sit. I was raised in Northeast Heights, and so growing up, my perspective of the world was shaped by that, being in a private school and all this. So somebody else raised in a different environment would be different. So what I think happens in our culture, whether it's because of our background or our politics or whatever, what we tend to do is we tend to disagree, we tend to distance, and we tend to demonize. So we disagree, then we distance. I don't want anything to do with that person. And then we demonize them, we vilify them. They're what's wrong with the world. They're what's wrong with America. They're what's wrong with this place. You know what the Bible says? I'm what's wrong with the world.
Yeah, that's right.
That we're all sinners. That every single one of us is a part of what's wrong with the world. And so we do that. We disagree, we distance, we demonize. But what I believe we need to do is that we need to embrace, we need to engage, and we need to empathize. And so embrace the person. Say, you know what, you are somebody who's loved by God. You're made in God's image. Maybe it's a black person, maybe it's a cop, maybe it's a Democrat, maybe it's a Republican. Embrace them. You're someone loved by God. Jesus said to love Samaritans, right? And so embrace that person, engage with them. Maybe you do need to challenge them in part of their view, but then ultimately empathize and empathize with what aspects of what they believe you can affirm and you can work together on certain issues. I think that's the only way we're going to make progress. Otherwise we're going to end up killing each other.
Yeah. I know we agree on this, that connection is the key.
Yes.
And that's exactly what that whole thing put together, because you get in a fight with your wife or your husband or whoever it may be, and we immediately separate ourselves.
Yeah.
And there's so many times that Jesus has told us, don't go to bed with an upset heart or whatever it needs to be, that we just have to go hold it.
Yeah.
Right? We need to be there, but what we do is we decide when that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? Well, I'm not going to, different churches, right? They don't agree on a topic, and they separate themselves, which separates our city or the believers, and truly the weak believers.
Yeah.
The spiritually disciplined don't just run away.
Yeah.
Right? But it's the ones down at the bottom that are confused about, well, how can a Christian be that way?
Yeah.
Right? I'm still trying to find out who I am. So I think it's really important that connection's the key,
Yes.
and they work through those techniques. Don't, distancing, right, from the whole process of what needs to go right. Disagreeing, right, and demonizing.
Yeah.
Those are issues, but if you're able to empathize, embrace, and engage, it can be another.
Absolutely.
So, before we end here, is there any other thoughts or comments you'd like to talk to people in the city about what we can do to make this whole process better, right? How can we all get along?
Yeah, I feel like my role as a pastor isn't, always to make the church feel comfortable or kind of play to my base. And I'll just be honest that I was raised in a church, where I'll just talk about my own personal devotions. I'll just focus on myself, right? I would read the Bible. I would underline the verses about God's grace. I would maybe underline the verses about discipline and hard work and the verses about lust and sexual purity. All that's amazing, right? But it came to my attention, some years ago that there was other parts of the Bible that I wasn't giving the right amount of attention to, and so a lot of us can quote Isaiah 1:18, beautiful verse, "Come now, let us reason together, though your sins are as scarlet, they shall be white as snow, though they're red like crimson, they will be as wool," right? But a lot of us don't read the verse immediately before that, which is Isaiah 1:17, which says, "Learn to do right, seek justice, and defend the oppressed." And so I want to challenge you. Maybe you're out trying to scrutinize and demonize maybe the Black Lives Matter movement, or you're trying to do this. Oh, they're trying to set up a one world government. It's George Soros. Maybe not. Maybe take time and listen to people who are suffering, and maybe look at those other verses in the Bible, because the Bible isn't from the right or from the left, it's from above.
So good, guys. And for those that are not as smart as this man and biblically is blessed, I think the thing I get out of this is just love everybody, right? Love your neighbor as God asked us to do, all right? And there's no other greater answer to that.
Yeah,
so
right.
Love each other. Guys, we appreciate you. As we come to you, always reach out to us, 346-4673. And as I said, Pastor Jesse Lusko, thank you for being with us. Go to Calvary Westside. Give it a shot. Go out there, a beautiful building. They do a great job of taking care of you. Care campaigns that reach out and serve the city, the community, and the state. So again, we encourage you guys. Visit us on Facebook, all of our social media outlets that we have. As always, we love you guys. Be blessed.